Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Witch's Tea, where we'll be talking about the Fae and fairies and part two of our fairies, I don't know, series. And we're talking about house spirits today. So I'm Malorine of Moonlight Divination on all platforms.
And I'm Violet of Violet the Green Witch and Fox and Bear Healing on all platforms. If you just joined us on The Witch's Tea, we will discuss topics centered around witchcraft, magical practices, and everything beyond the veil.
We bring magic and chaos into your life.
Yay!
All right.
So we're really excited to talk about fairies again. Fairies are the most wonderful of beings, and we like to break some of that stereotyping that definitely has come by a lot of the folklore that people are so afraid of them, or I think that they're dangerous, or working with them is dangerous.
I mean, they're not to be messed with for sure.
Yeah.
Well, but then I don't see them. Yeah, I don't think they're dangerous. I think, obviously, I mean, we don't want to cross any beings or even humans in that way, right. But yeah.
We want to just be respectful. Like the idea of working with a fairy or having a relationship with them, I think is just that we need to be respectful of them and be respectful of their environment. And definitely there have been incidences of people having negative repercussions due to their negligence with nature. So the fairies don't like that very much, and they will come at you for it. And it's not like they're not gonna like try to kill you or do anything like that, but it's more like, maybe your lawnmower stopped working, or maybe you're trying to build something in your home and like you can't get a contractor, or you can't get the work done that you need on your yard or whatever, because they're preventing it from happening, because they're just, hey, it's their home too, and you're like not respecting it. So I think that's where a lot of people get confused, that like fairies will be harmful just for harmful sake because they're tricky and all these things. I think it's just more that there's a misunderstanding that they've had to protect themselves for so long because of industrialization and just humanity expanding on their territories. Like they've lived in nature all of their existence, and then we are encroaching on their habitats, much like we do to animals, right?
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I think maybe let's have a couple of ways that we're talking about respect. So maybe some people don't know what that means. Maybe we can talk about a few ways. Especially we talked about a little bit before with the general idea of fairies and respecting them in terms of the environment, like picking up trash and it's like to take what you brought it in to the beach, take it out with you, leaving offerings, that sort of thing. But What about house spirits? What would you say?
Well, house spirits, I mean, depends, I guess, on where and how you live. I live in an apartment, but those who live in a house, for example, too, people tend to like rip out trees and bushes and plants and then put in a lawn and that sort of thing. Really be mindful with those choices that you're making, because there are areas where the fairies do live. And definitely, you can probably feel it out where there's like a little bramble, or there's like a little, like a real like explosion of plants a lot of times where you'll have fairies living. So you might want to leave that part. You can even set a part aside, like if you are lucky enough to have a yard or an outdoor space, you can also dedicate a space to them, right? Like have like a little area that is untouched, that's just for them. And you can like literally tell them, this is your space. I'm not touching it. It's for you. And, I'll respect your space. You respect my space, and it's all good. But as far as like living inside, the fairies and elves and all the beings that live with us daily, it's more about, I think, just building that relationship with them and acknowledging that they're here. And like for me, I have like a little altar that I like to put out a little a little bit of brandy for them, you know. Or sometimes all I'll do is I'll put a little bit of like lavender syrup with a little seltzer or something, you know, something, or a little oat milk, you know, or something. And I'll bring in some nice flowers for them sometimes that I've picked.
They like the alcohol.
Yeah,
I was like, they like the liquor.
They like the liquor.
they like the, yeah. You see them wandering around. That's when we could see them when they're a little bit intoxicated, and they're like, oh my god, the cloak! Oh my gosh, you know. Imagine that, like you watching these fairies walk around Brooklyn, streets of Brooklyn. That would be funny.
That would be really funny.
On the news,
all tipsy.
It's interesting you mentioned. I don't know, like
no, good.
But I mentioned, but we're talking about because I'm just writing notes here. We have I remember we talked about some stories. I feel like I have two particular stories talking about like the childhood house that I grew up in. It's in the like Flatbush region of Brooklyn. You know, it's more it's like a colonial house and has like, when I was growing there, it had a lot of trees. But then I came back and to see my grandparents, and we were taking care of them towards their end of life. And the biggest tree in the front, this beautiful oak tree, was ripped out, and it broke my heart because I love that tree. I used to roller skate around it. I used to think that I was Tootie from The Facts of Life.
Oh my god!
And I used to wear roller skates, not in the house necessarily, but we had a foyer, and I used to like go back and forth in these old school. It wasn't like old school roller skates. And I used to go around it, circle around it back. And I was like, I used to love that tree. And also it stopped me when I was going to fall too. So that tree was gone. It just felt, I could definitely feel the difference in the house. And I felt like it was our protector. And I feel like the beings who were in that tree were gone. And it made me really sad. I mean, it still makes me sad. I go to that house and I'm just like, it's like crazy, but I feel a sense of sadness around it.
Well, there's folklore around that too, that they talk about, you know, because the dryads live within the trees, right? They, you know, so the old legends are that when humanity started to really kind of take over more, the Fae had to find places to go to, right, to disappear into. So the dryads were one of the nature spirits too, and so they disappeared into the trees. So they're literally living inside the trees. They're a separate entity from the tree, and it's tree spirit. But supposedly there's folklore around it that if you kill a tree, you kill the dryad within the tree.
It's heartbreaking. And I remember coming back, and it was just like after college or something. And then I just had this immense amount of sadness and grief. And I was like, what am I like grieving? And it took me a while to put it together that it was not just that tree on the block. There were other trees as well that were cut down for different reasons. I mean, there's an older, it's an older, you know, the houses are older, and the sewer systems, which I don't know why they thought it was wise, but they created these sewer systems with L pipes. So pretty much things would get stuck, and it's in an L shape. So you literally have to like sometimes manually go in there and like, I don't know. I mean, I don't do it, but the companies do. And that a lot of the houses in that area, the roots were going into those places as well. So it made it even worse. So a lot of houses just cut the tree down. So, but then they're like, it's like they lost the character of it was a whole thing. So yeah, that's like my story, my connection to the dryads and to trees. But also that it, you know, it's interesting because we talked about that in introducing the spirit groups, and we having a discussion about this before too, like how to separate them. And sometimes they merge, right? So even though we're talking about dryads, I feel like they were protecting the home. They were a part of the home in a sense. I felt like they were part of my childhood, right? And I would definitely like speak to them, and I felt like they would come into the home a lot. I lived on like the top floor, and I used to just really connect. Oh, we had a lot of birds. Even now, for me, like an offering, I I give offerings to the birds, and there's a big tree across. There's one of the last few trees on the block across the street, and the birds know they can always rely on me for either some kind of bread or nuts. I remember I was ordering from Amazon, and I ordered food for my guinea pig, and my sister saw the package and it was big. She was like, what else is in there? I was like, bird feed. She was like, you don't have birds. I was like, yeah, I do. I have literally like 100 birds. Like they're all my babies. And yeah, if I don't feed them, literally, I'm hearing the chirping, the furious chirping.
Yeah.
Like, where were you?
Yeah.
Where's my food?
I have the same experience. I'm like, and I have the squirrels too. The squirrels will literally knock the little house down that I put the what do you call it? Nuts in.
They're so
They'll
aggressive.
literally like get so angry, I guess, or so upset that there's no nuts. They throw the house. They
are so aggressive. And it's aggressively cute because they're so cute. Like my guinea pig does that too. If he doesn't like what I'm doing, he kind of like does his head and he throws things. And I'm like, okay, I guess. Yeah, anyway, don't get distracted. But yeah, it's just interesting that they merge, so something that's external and definitely come into the house and affect it that way too.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think like what we were talking about before we even got on is that, like there's so much information out there about Fae, and like no one can actually really say for certain, what type of fairies belong in each group. What's a nature spirit versus what's a house spirit, what's a land spirit, what's an elemental.
Yeah.
It kind of gets kind of muddled up. So don't feel bad if you can't figure that out, because no one really can. Actually, not even researchers. Like it's not, because there's just so much information from different cultures, since it exists in so many different cultures.
Exactly.
They kind of just fall into different categories and then hop over into different categories depending on who's talking about them, really. So
exactly. And they blend in, like, the example just kind of shows that, even stuff inside the house can also affect what's happening outside. And they merge, different elements merge. We talked about this in another episode, but the dragons, they're not just fire dragons, they're are water dragons, and they're dragons that don't exist in a being of light, so it's varied. So definitely don't feel like you have to know it all or to put them into categories. I think it's a human way. I mean, we all do this, and that's just it's a way to understand things.
Right. I guess we love to label things, basically.
We label and we categorize, and that is our human nature. But that's how we break things down that way to understand it. But it's important to go the reverse and to be as expansive as possible with it as well, which I think sometimes people forget.
Absolutely.
They go more into detail than they forget.
It's true.
But do you have any stories with?
I have quite a few stories. But one of my favorite stories is when what was it? I think it was during like lockdown during the pandemic. Not that the pandemic's technically over, people, but during our lockdowns, I was working, and I was work late a lot, and I was at my desk, and my desk to the right of it is my bedroom. And I was sitting at my desk, and I kind of turned my head because I could swear I was seeing motion in my bedroom. And I kind of turned a little bit, and I see an elf literally sneaking, like tiptoeing across the room.
Wow.
And I'm just like, I actually said out loud, I see you. And then I just kind of like ran.
No.
And I know you're probably in here, guys. So like, I'm sorry I freaked you out.
How big was it?
I would say like a 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
Like a 3 or 4-year-old. That's like about this big.
That's huge.
So what, like that's like 3.5 feet or something?
It kind of is what I saw in upstate, because it was around that height. Okay. So it's okay. So that wasn't an alpha. I mean, what was he wearing? What were they wearing? I should say. I'm gonna genderize it.
They were wearing they were wearing kind of like earthy looking fabrics or colors, I would say. And then like not a pointy hat, but more like a floppy hat that sort of like was almost like something you would see like in old time things, like where people would wear, like the men would wear like those hats to go to sleep, that it's almost like a Santa hat that's like flopping over.
I love those.
So something like it was sort of like that, and it was sort of like a forest green color, very dark. Everything that they were wearing was sort of very earthy color, like browns and mustardy and like olive, forest greens and stuff. And they were like a little bit like tannish colored, their skin color. And they were about, I would say like 3.5 feet, between 3.5 feet and 4 feet tall. And they were just silly too, like in their emotions. Because like it was like exaggerate. It was like, you know, when children exaggerate that they're trying to be quiet, and like I'm gonna be real quiet. I'm gonna tiptoe across the room,
like a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of that situation. So it was so funny, and it made me really happy to see them, and it actually inspired me to do a sculpture.
Oh,
that little sculpture sitting over there.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's just a head right now.
Maybe we'll put it on our website to the photo of it so you can all can see it. I wanted to ask, so it's interesting, talk about like the way they were dressed. And I wonder, I mean, like they've been a part of our world, like we're a part of their world, I should say. And I wonder if like will we see ones that are like more modern dressed, or like even like when they go into their other portals or spaces, is that maybe why they're still wearing kind of like old fashioned clothes, you think? Like maybe time for them is not, it's not linear.
Yeah. And they're, you know, they're fourth dimensional beings, right? So their spirit being that's like existing within our worlds, but their world is literally overlapped with ours, right? So to me, it's probably that, yeah, like they're still living in their world as well as ours. Yeah. So this is like what their customs are versus our customs. And that's kind of how I think about it more. It's just like, you know, every culture has its customs and their fashions and stuff like that. And especially those that are more removed from the modern day kind of things, even like we see it in with humans, right? People who aren't exposed to the everyday modern kind of technology and everything, we're seeing them with different kind of fashion to the modern fashion, right? And that's kind of how I think of it, you know. So I think, you know, and I think also it's just like it's kind of what they have, you know. They're not since there's different kinds too, you know, when you're talking about like the house elves and stuff like that, they're, you know, they're dressed to work, you know, they're going to work, they're dressed to work. So it's not like I think so the British call their fairies trooping fairies, which are like the aristocrats of the fairies, which is actually one of my guides is one of those. She's a queen. But there are a lot of queens and kings that are in Fae. So they have they're very different looking, you know, they're as tall or taller than humans, and they dress finely, like beautiful clothes and everything. But I would still say that they have like an old timey sense of fashion compared to us still, you know.
I just wonder like if I will see like one of the fairies with a jogging suit or something. Like, really I just got like, you know, they're like, think back to, I mentioned this story in the last episode. I don't want to rehash it, but pretty much I was upstate New York and in like a more remote area, and I feel like it was an elf because I'm thinking the height that you named, like 3.5, 4. It was about that height, and in the distance, and I was like watching my friend's farm and trying to get the ducks into their enclosure, which is interesting. And I went closer to the chicken coop, which is where that being was, and I found the shoe, the little booty. And so I feel like, you know, they probably I feel like they pick up stuff too. It's like, oh, like these dogs shoes, I left it, and like it was an Ugg boot. It was like a little dog's Ugg boot, but it's like, why was this Ugg boot there in the middle of the wilderness when there are no dogs? There was no one there, and it wasn't there that same afternoon, which I just put feet out. So obviously something was walking there, and I think they just like saw the shoes and took it.
Yeah, because I mean, dogs lose their shoes all the time because dogs don't wear shoes. You know?
Like, why is UGG creating dog boots? First of all, I didn't even know that was a thing, and the fact that they found it, I'm like, maybe they ate some Chihuahua or something. I don't know, some poodle.
That was a really good shoe.
Maybe not ate it,
but like I think that was like a bigger dog for sure.
Oh yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was
not a tussle. I'm feeling, like I said, I'm feeling the dog lost its shoe, and like this being was just like, hey, a boot.
That looks good.
That looks great.
And it was snowing too. So they probably were just like, win.
Exactly. It just needs
mine now. It's mine now.
How about you? Other than that, have you had any experiences, especially at home or anything, with like any elves or fairies?
Well, it's weird because like I feel like especially as a medium, I feel like we have like I've seen in like glimpses, but more out in nature, not really in the home. I've felt them, and I've experienced things. So I think when you mentioned as well the explosion of like certain plants, so in a little story, this is like what I've experienced. The same house in the front, like I used to garden there with my grandmother, and I know her plants, and I know what she has growing every year that I don't have to replant. Like the bulbs are there. So she had maybe one sunflower, but she got rid of it years ago. So we haven't had sunflowers for a while. The neighbors across the street, obviously, seeds disperse and they come over. And last summer, insane, we had an explosion of sunflowers. They took over the entire garden. We had one showed up, and I was like, oh, that's nice. And I was like, okay. And then there was 4, and then there were 7, and then there were 10, then there were 20. And
that's crazy.
And they were so high. There were some that grew to the 2nd floor.
Oh my God.
We literally had to keep cutting it down.
That's so crazy.
And then they went to the backyard. And we've had like a whole explosion there. Tons of like beautiful insects as well were living and inhabiting. I have some video I have to show you. But beautiful like explosion of ladybugs. I mean, it was one day in the summer because it was just so many sunflowers. I was just like, well, I don't know what's happening. It was like surrounded by sunflowers. And I was sitting outside on the porch, and it just like 5 or 6 ladybugs were just like walking on the banister. And then I was like, where are they coming from? And then I looked at the sunflower bush or the grouping of sunflowers, like hundreds of them. It was just, and I was like, where are they coming? And then when I went back to check later that day, they were obviously all gone. So it almost felt like, did I see that? Did I really see that? Or was that really there? Because it didn't make sense. Like, where are these ladybugs coming from?
Right.
But they were just, and then they weren't there. So I was just like, okay, like that for me. And then I know it's like a nature being, and the plants, but it was like connected to the house. And I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I want to hope that it was like these other beings that are protecting the home.
Yeah.
And because the tree's not there, it's like, these plants just materialized. And I mean, I got to show you pictures that they took over the whole front yard.
Wow.
And it was just like people,
they
were hanging over. And then I feel like, my aunt and my mom, who are technically like the owners of the house, they were just, oh, it's unsightly. We should cut them down. Yeah. Cause I mean, they're long, and they were just, but they're just so big. I mean, they literally took over. Cause we had like other bushes, and it was manicured and things. Yeah. So they're like, oh, it doesn't look right. And then I was like people were walking by, and the sunflowers like hitting them in the face. Like that's how they were just big. And I was like, they're protecting us. Yeah. This is a protection.
Absolutely.
And just, grasshoppers and crickets and all sorts. This is the middle of Brooklyn. All sorts of these little, and I have a thing with insects, as you know, like when we went upstate, and that, I don't know if you remember that one insect that kind of like flew to me, and I had it on my hand.
Oh, yeah.
We went to the garden. I'm like fascinated by them. And it was like, I caught, it was actually one that was really interesting. I went outside once, and I was sitting by one of the bushes, and I looked in, and I saw 2 grasshoppers having sex.
Oh my God.
And I was like, and they were just, they freeze. They freeze when they're having, they're just literally like this. They're like, you caught me. You caught us. And I was just like, I have video. It's crazy. I had to, no one's going to believe me if I don't, I took video. I was like, because no one's going to believe me. I just saw 2 grasshoppers having sex. But I was like, okay, procreate, do your thing. It's just, 'tis the season. But I just feel like, it's just interesting again, that transmission of the nature spirits and the beings outside protecting their home, because the seeds or whatever that definitely transferred over from our neighbor's yard, they weren't anyone else's yards.
Right.
No one else's yards. And even for him, he didn't even grow sunflowers that year, which is really strange.
Yeah.
So we were the only house on the block that had like the weird explosion of sunflowers.
Yeah, and sunflowers are kind of heavy, unless like birds are bringing them over, dropping them. That's the only other thing, because they're kind of heavy they can't blow like a dandelion over,
Yeah, so I'm thinking. So I mean, we do have a lot of birds in that area, but the fact that none of the other houses had
and it wasn't like a sunflower. It was multiple sunflowers.
Explosions. Yeah. So I was like, I know this is like some nature beings or elementals that are coming in.
Used to be, definitely.
Yeah. So it was kind of comforting, and I would bring the sunflowers in because we had so much. I would ask, do you want me to cut you down and bring inside? They were like, yes. So I would bring them in, and sunflowers, which they're beautiful, but they don't last long if you cut them fresh. So they lasted like 2 days. But it was just nice to have them, and I would put them on the altar and just replace them because we had so much.
And you can get the seeds from them too.
So I call out the seeds. And I love sunflower seeds. So I feel like it was like win-win.
Yeah, exactly.
Win here.
Awesome.
Win.
Yeah, there's just it's interesting too, because like there's so many kinds of fairies that like, and when I say fairies, I mean that includes like all of them, elves and everything that really are around us every day too. And I definitely have experienced a lot of like they're very funny. You know, when people talk about them being mischievous, they're not mischievous as in being like mischievous to hurt you on purpose or anything like that. They do things that are really funny that we may not necessarily think that they're funny and like might actually scare you sometimes even. I had this one incident, I think I already knew you, I think too. Like, so I had been going to Minka, this place that like a holistic spiritual place that we both, you know, learned in and worked out of, I guess. So I was doing reading there and I had left my tarot, or I thought I left my tarot. Okay. I thought I packed it actually. I was just like, I made sure I packed it. Right. And I checked my bag and everything, and I saw that it was in my bag and everything. I get home. I have a very specific place where I keep my tarot. I keep it in my headboard. I have a headboard that I keep all my cards in. And I was going to do something that like a couple of hours later, another reading, and I went to grab them and they weren't there. And I know I had put them back there. And I was like, and I almost lost my mind because it was like my first tarot that I've had since I was 18. And so I called Minka and they said they didn't see them. And I was like, okay, I'm coming back. I looked in all the rooms. I couldn't find them. I came back. I looked all over my apartment. I kept feeling like they were in the apartment the whole time because I can always feel where something is. Yeah. And I went back to the bedroom and they were back in the headboard. And I was like, you guys, this is not funny. This is not funny. And I could seriously hear it giggling. Oh my God. And I was just like, it's not funny. Come on.
Do you feel like they were doing it just for like a laugh, or were they doing it like, I mean, was there like, you think it was like a reason?
No, I don't think it was. I think that was just really funny. They just, they often have done that to me where they'll move things that I know for a fact that they're there. And, and I know that I'm a forgetful person, but there's certain things that I keep in, like I'm an incredibly, I have a lot of crap in my apartment, which you won't know, but it's all organized. Everything has its place. And when it's not in its place, I know it's missing. You know it's not there, yeah. And especially my tarot cards. I know exactly where they're going to be. You know, like I know where they are at all times. They're like almost an extension of me. Yeah. So that was one of the things. I've definitely had other instances where they've done silly things like that, you know, hiding things from me. Or other times it's been the other way around where I'm really losing my mind that I can't find something, you know, and all of a sudden it'll appear for me somewhere that I knew that it wouldn't be there. Yeah. You know, like I have this salt lamp that the little knob keeps coming off of it and it keeps falling behind my like credence, whatever you want to call it, my bookshelf or whatever. And I couldn't find it back there or anything. And I was looking for it. And I was like, oh, it must be like really underneath something. And I just like gave up looking for it. And then like the next day I find it literally next to the lamp. And I was like, thank you.
Just placed there.
Yeah. It's like, thank you so much. Yeah. So how about you? Other things that you have happen in your
thing? I can be forgetful, but I'm also like you. I have like organized chaos. Everything has its place, and yeah, the place has a thing. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I think when maybe in certain locations, I've had experiences where I've like lost things. I'm just trying to think because I feel like it's more connected to the location and to maybe like the out. Again, I feel like for me, it's not that I'm experiencing them in the home necessarily, but they're always connected to the outside for me. Okay. And I don't know. I was like, I wish I can like see. I mean, do I want to see them in the home? I don't know. Let me think about that. Let me rethink that. Do I want to see like a toddler like being in my house? Maybe not. But outside, all good. I haven't actually seen them inside my house. I'm just thinking I'll have to like rethink. It's more for me, it's like more the spirits and like beings that were human. Those are the ones that I see.
How about like, because I've seen this too, like little flashes of light, like little teeny lights.
I have seen those, yeah. And definitely like flickering of lights, those sort of things. It's been new. So I'm actually like trying to connect the dots. And my clairgustance, is it clairgustance or clair aliens? When you smell things?
Clairgustus is taste.
Okay, so clair aliens.
Clair aliens. So some people will put clairgustus for both, but
yeah, because they're both connected, right? The olfactory and our taste.
Yeah.
But the smell, whatever the clair, but the smell is, I think it's clair aliens. But that's been coming through strong. And I was asking, like, well, what is this? What is this about? Is this like beings that were human? And they were telling me that it was kind of connected to the Fae. And I've always had like a loose connection. But I've been like smelling, I would just randomly smell basil or like the rosemary tea. Like when I smelled it, it brought me back to a time like a few weeks ago when I smelled it randomly. Okay. It was like it brought me back to that memory. And I was thinking like, what was I doing? And I think it was like maybe, I don't know. I feel like so they were kind of telling me like that's their way of communicating with me, that is through my other clairs rather than seeing them.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ramble a little bit on that, but I'll have to think about it and remember if I actually seen them.
For me too, I think it's just that like when I do my daily meditations, I always go to fairy when I'm doing my meditations. That's like my go-to thing. I've had past lives in fairy, so I mean, like I know you have too. We talked about this. So for me during meditations, I always like automatically do this journey meditation that like, and it just started happening kind of big. And that's how I met my, my fairy godmother, one of my, spirit guides who is a fairy.
This is the queen.
She's a queen. Yeah.
So she literally is like she looks like the fairy. She's
all white. Yeah. Like sparkling white, basically. Like even her skin is almost like translucent and stuff. Yeah. And every time I meditate, I always I have these different experiences, but I always have different kinds of Fae brothers and sisters, which is what I usually call them, waiting for me to enter the trance, so I can, go with them to a sacred grove and we meditate together, with a great mother and, we exchange stuff. And sometimes we'll have like a tea party, which is kind of awesome. And like all these little beings are sitting with me and they're like giving me stuff. And I know like that's like another folklore that you read about a lot where like, if the Fae give you something, don't take it. Because, like now you're going to owe them and whatever. I don't believe that to be true. Also, the fact that I give them offerings regularly, I feel like it's an equal exchange as well. And the fact that they know that how much I love nature and I respect it and I take care of it with all my being as much as I can. But yeah, I definitely feel like that's one of the reasons too. The Fae that I've actually been seeing more and more in my home have been coming through is because of that relationship I've been building through my meditations.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I love that they're just having a tea party with you. It sounds like a really nice way to start the day, for sure.
Yeah, and also like when I do those meditations too, they will give me things. They'll give me like stones sometimes, like for healing. They'll show me healing techniques, and because they're amazing fairy healers, right? And even when I work with Reiki, I will work with fairies to do healing as well.
It's amazing.
Oh, another thing that happened to me once, I remember in the house. I don't know. I think it was also during the pandemic. I was showering. And I usually use like the shower as a way to clear myself too, right? And I closed my eyes for a second, then I opened them, and there were all these little tiny lights dancing around me. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm hallucinating. There's something wrong with me. And then I realized, no, they're the Undines. So the Undines being elementals, but they're a different kind of fairy too that can be in the home as well, because we have all the elements within our home. We have all the elements within our bodies,
I love. So did they just like dance around you, or?
Yeah, they were just like, it was just like little teeny lights that almost look like teeny tiny fireflies, but like even smaller and really bright.
Yeah.
Like a bright blue light that was just like dancing in the air. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I like, yeah, I think it's like we all have like different connections. And I feel like it does a lot of times originate from like past lives, and they'll be different for everybody, for sure. And yeah, I love these stories that you have, like these, they're kind of like popping up and playing around with you. And it's just interesting too, because like just looking around, like you have these dolls. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's like I've been too I don't know, with horror movie culture, like, I was like, not say the scariest thing for me. I don't think that would be the scariest thing to see a doll walking around, but that's almost like the same height. I used to have this I guess life size, quote unquote, that was about 4 feet tall. I used to have a doll like that growing up. And my sister was so afraid of this doll. Like I could not have the doll. Like I literally could not have it in the upstairs, like in my room, because she was like, I don't even want to know that doll is there. It's a freak. And it's had these eyes that would go back automatically, the little closing lids. Mm-hmm. So it would freak her out. Like say I had the doll sitting up and it'll just close its eyes. She was just like, no, get me around it. I was just like, it's just a doll. I don't get it. But I think, yeah, if I saw that walking around, I know it's not a doll. I know Faeries are not dolls, but it's kind of the same size. I'm like, how would I react? I don't know. Maybe they know. I feel like they have an idea. They're like, okay, how can I show up in the way that this particular person would be willing to see?
Yeah. And the things they're not willing to show themselves for the most part to most people because they've had such a terrible relationship with humans for so many years, right? Yeah. So it's a matter of them trusting you more than anything. Yeah. But speaking about that, your sister's, what do you call it, your doll that your sister was freaked out about, I was thinking about this because I was actually reading a little bit about dark elves, which I didn't know about. So the Scandinavians really categorize their fae into light elves and dark elves. And I was thinking about that too, because like that it could be that like a dark elf was around the doll or maybe embodying the doll too, that freaked her out, because dark elves too, like one of the things that they say is like, if you were afraid of sleeping with the door open in your closet when you were a child, or there were certain areas of the house that were kind of shadowed, that you were kind of afraid to go into, generally it's because dark elves live in those areas. And the thing is, like, like with every being, including humans, right, there's ones that are a little more scarier than others. Not everybody is love and light, as some people like to think.
So thank you so much for joining us.
If you like this podcast, please remember to rate us and leave a review on whatever streaming service you are listening on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, so more people can enjoy it.
We appreciate you very much. This is The Witch's Tea with Malorine at Moonlight Divination.
And Violet at Violet the Green Witch and Fox and Bear Healing.
Remember, you are magic.
And life is weird.